Hi, my name's Rohan Sharma.
And my name is Venki.
We're gonna start off the podcast today with talking about why you wanted to be an engineer.
Sounds good, Rohan. It's really nice to talk to you about this topic. And I have to roll back the years, and I'm thinking of my childhood when I really loved building things. And I'm going to date myself here a little bit. I'm talking a couple of, or more than that, a few decades ago when uh, computers were not as ubiquitous as they are today. And so I spent a lot of time with friends and my cousins, building things, Legos and other stuff. And and so there was a natural inclination towards building things, which took me towards engineering and science. And two, I did like mathematics and physics. And so that's what was the initial seed that was sown very early in childhood. But as I approached high school, I had to make choices, and I looked around. It was pretty clear that I wanted to do some form of engineering. And the reality is that if I had gotten into electronics or electrical engineering, I would have taken that. But it was, as always, tough competition to get into, different areas of engineering. And mechanical was sought after, and I was able to get it. And between mechanical and electronics and electrical and computer science, it was not a bad thing to end with mechanical engineering. I really liked the extent to which physics defined what mechanical engineering is, and everything that you see around, from automobiles to things that make factories work. We're all based in mechanical engineering. So just to give people an idea of the story I'm telling, and to be able to connect to it, I'm really talking about the 1980s and the 1990s here. So this is really long ago, and so just to give you a sense for sort of the time frame that I come from.
Yeah. Um, and then speaking of like how that was back in the 1980s, how do you think that mechanical engineering or engineering overall has changed since then?
It's a great question. I just want to point out that I also did a master's in chemistry. Because, this is in India. I was able to get into one of the prestigious universities there, which allowed us to do a science and an engineering course together. And I sort of took advantage of that. And chemistry was very interesting too. It's a, we all, scientific thinking is reflected in physics and science and biology and all forms of engineering. And it's amazing how it turns out to be so different in two different fields, right? So chemistry masters and a bachelor's in mechanical engineering is what I did, and that diversity helped me really flex my brain in different ways as I went through those 5 years. And I would say over the years, the all of the engineering disciplines seem to have converged and come together. I mean, not that this wasn't happening back then, because an automobile is made up of lots of electronics as well as mechanical components. It was true then, and it's true today, but the extent to which computer science has brought together all of these things, it's just been incredible, just to watch it from the sidelines. And in a minute, I'll talk about what else I did after doing mechanical engineering and chemistry. But over the years, I think all of them, all of these have become, I would think of just two layers. One is the conceptual layer, where you understand all the basics and foundations and fundamentals of the engineering field that you're going into, mechanical engineering in this case. And two is its application. And back in the day, the application, there was only one avenue for you to experiment and learn hands-on, which is to go build that part yourself, or build that car yourself, or build that little component. yourself. But today you have computers that can help you simulate and really accelerate your learning. And so not only that, it coexists with other forms of engineering. You know, clearly computer engineering and computer science is a big part of every form of study today. And so is electronics. So today I feel like whether you're a mechanical engineer or an electronics engineer or any other engineer, or even you're in science or even in the arts, I think computer science seems like how English was fundamental to learning anything. I think computer science is fundamental to learning anything. So that's how I see things have changed. What that means for the students of today is that you are going to be multi-skilled, and you're going to have almost like you're rewired to be a superior generation, if I may say so. Let me stop there and see if you have any questions, Rohan.
Um, None so far. I guess that was also what I was mostly expecting, how much technology is changing, especially with the internet and everything, and how that's affected learning.
No doubt.
Yeah, so could you talk a little bit more about your MBA?
Yes. So I, after completing engineering, again, want to remind everybody that this would seem like a prehistoric era for people who've grown up in the if you were born after 2000 or after 2010 maybe, or if you're listening to this podcast, if you're one of the newer generations, you'd be thinking like, how did people live during those times without cell phones and all of that? But this was that time. And after I finished engineering, I did join an engineering company. I was in a company that made automobiles and construction equipment. And I was really curious about how these things were made. I wanted to really see it work. I did that for a couple of years, and I think we're going to talk about this a little later in the podcast, Rohan. But you you there are things developing inside of you as interests. If you're observing the world, if you are into sports, if you are into culture, if you're mingling with different people, you're getting to know others, everything has an influence on you. And in those 2 years that I worked for this company, I realized that the world of business and leadership was beginning to appeal a lot to me. And I was seeing how a lot of business management had been, like, the science of it was becoming more and more accessible, and they were getting into corporations. Corporations were not just hiring engineers and accountants to get things done, but they were also hiring people that were experts in management to run the company better. And so those two things, an interest in business management and an interest in leadership, pushed me towards doing an MBA. And I realized that I didn't have to let go of what I had started with, which was mechanical engineering, and I would say foundations in analytical thinking that is common to all engineering and science, and I would argue even for art and many other things. And I said, like, this is a great combination to have, that you know how products are made, you know how engineering works in the world, but you also combine that with how these things are commercialized. It's, for example, it's not just enough to know how a car is made or a computer is made, but how the business of taking it out and putting it in the marketplace, putting it in stores and marketing the whole idea to people, getting them attracted to it, packaging it, pricing it, distributing it, and having people buy it. That is another science of its own. And you would think if you only knew how to build a product and you assume that everything else was easy, that customers would find you and pick up your product. Rarely is that the case, as we all know today. And so that fascinated me. And so I took a break from my work and I went and did my MBA. and I did a master's in business administration, and that was specialized in marketing. And ever since, my career has been going in different directions. We're going to talk a little bit about the different roads I took, but that's what led me to the MBA, Rohan.
Yeah. So, what was your first job? Whether it was, did you do any jobs in between getting your degrees, or was it right after you finished them?
Yeah. No, good question. Just after my engineering, I did join this automobile and construction equipment company, and I worked there for a couple of years. And that's when I just realized that I do have an interest in, business management and leadership as much as I have an interest in understanding basic scientific concepts and how things work. And so yeah, I worked for a couple of years after my engineering, and then took a break, did my master's in business administration. To some extent, I have to tell you, when I started doing my MBA, I was thinking, this isn't as deep as engineering or science is. I mean, after all, business administration doesn't even require a course. People just run businesses without having an MBA after all. But I learned by doing the course and by through experience that formal knowledge in the world of business really makes a difference. Of course, you can learn it on the job as well, but it really does make a difference. Let me stop there and see if I answered your question.
Yeah, that did. How was uh, was it easy making the decision to do an MBA, or were you very on the edge about it?
I wasn't on the edge about it because the option was to do another master's in engineering, or perhaps go towards a PhD, which would all been good options. But I realized that I enjoy um, working with people. That's another angle that came up, right? I mean, these are things that you realize only when you start doing that you like doing something. Till then, you have no idea that you would like it. So, in the 2 years that I worked, while I liked learning how the automobile was made and how the factories worked, I realized that one of the things I enjoyed was working together in a team and perhaps taking the initiative to go to the front and lead certain aspects of that whole exercise. Those appeal to me a lot, and I would always be curious about these questions, like how the hell do they actually make money with this? There's just so many things going on here, and all of this needs to be planned and organized. And it's not just about getting the engineering right, it's about also getting the orchestration and the mechanics of the business right. And so it wasn't a very difficult decision. In fact, the only decision was when I was going to do it. Was it going to be after the first year at work or the second year at work? So uh, I think I probably waited a year too long, but I just wanted to make sure I'm grounded in the realities of what work is like. Because for anybody that is going into college, you come out of college with a certain view of how the world works, but when you go work for a company, it becomes very real. You deal with imperfections. You realize it's all about working well in a team. It's about people, and it's not always that you just have a great product and great engineering and everything else takes care of itself. Rarely is that the case. So yeah, it was a pretty easy decision for me.
Um, Looking at it from the perspective, like purely the perspective of someone here in the U.S. hiring, do you think
Yeah.
having an MBA made a very large difference in getting a job when you came here?
I would say two things. This definitely varies from company to company and person to person. But one thing I can say over the long run, so several ifs and depends on type of answers here, but I think it's good to break it down. Number one, if you grew up in an environment from childhood where you had a lot of exposure to business and how business works, accounting, human resources, managing people, how the entire chain of the business works, what is the role of different companies in an industry. If you grew up with a fair amount of interest in these things, whether it's finance, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, if you grew up with some interest in, like for example, the stock markets, if you grew up with all of that, I didn't grow up particularly being interested in these things. I was just focused on, going in that direction towards engineering as my field of study. But if you grew up being interested in these areas, then one could argue that there is only that incremental knowledge you're going to get in a master's of business administration, where it's really going to organize everything you need to know, that some of which you knew already, right? So that's scenario one. Scenario two is, of course, like me, I didn't have much of an exposure to or an interest about business management growing up. So I was curious to know how that worked. Now, those are two scenarios. The other scenario is when you go to an MBA, if you're able to internalize those concepts, then I would say it definitely makes a difference in the workplace. So whether you come from a background where you didn't know much about business management growing up, and then you did an MBA and you got all the fundamentals together, and then you deployed all of them in your workplace, it makes a big difference. Even if you knew a little bit and you grew up knowing, having an interest in business management, and maybe you did some, in school, work in school, set up some online store or whatever, and then you went on to do an MBA, and that MBA ends up formalizing and organizing and providing some structure to your knowledge. If you use that information, irrespective of which camp you came from, it is going to make a very big difference in the way you do the work. So I can say, given two situations, somebody with an awareness of structured knowledge about how to work with finance, work with people, work with sales, work with marketing, and how a company works, and therefore is an MBA, he or she is going to have a great chance of succeeding and knowing what they're doing. Now, that is about getting the work done. Now, as it pertains to appearing for interviews and getting a job, I think trends have changed every few years. There was a time when MBAs were getting picked up. You just had to do an MBA and you had a job waiting. There are so many different fields you can go to. If you're an engineer MBA, you could go work for, or if you're arts MBA, or if you're a science and then an MBA, you could go work for a wider range of companies than you could if you simply had your bachelor's degree, which is either science, engineering, or the arts. So it does open up your options, and you could go work for a consulting company. So many different options. Now, over the years, what I've noticed is that there are a few years where MBAs are very popular and they're hired a lot. And then there is a little bit of a low, and MBAs find it hard to find jobs, and so there is an up and down. So I don't know what the latest trend is. I think over the last few years, it's been a bit challenging for MBAs to find jobs, but I would go back to how much you have internalized what you've been taught in a business school. Because unlike what you learn in, say, a physics or a chemistry or one of those courses, where of course you could apply it in real life if you wanted to, but a lot of science, even digesting it, is a substantial amount of work and learning, and you don't really get to experiment with it in daily life as much unless you go into a lab. In the world of business management, the world is the lab. I mean, you deal with people every day, you do projects, and you can apply what you're learning in business management day one. So I would say, in taking an MBA, two things that people should, once you finish your bachelor's degree and you're going and doing an MBA, you should certainly pay attention to where those trends are shaping. But if the trends are that, yes, MBAs are continuing to be highly relevant, and depending on the nature of the job you want to work for a consulting company, then it's probably a good idea to do an MBA. But do pay attention to what the trends are looking like. And simply because I'm saying, at the end of the day, if the objective of doing an MBA is to either start a company or to find a job, then you want to be in the know of what to expect. So I would say that I haven't kept track with the latest on what's happening in the world of MBAs that are graduating, but a few years ago, I did not read that there were lots of MBAs and not as many jobs, but that might have changed today. But that's something worth checking. And second, the concepts that you will learn in an MBA, one might even argue that you could, and this is something I would have done in my childhood if I have to roll back the years, that I would have been curious about how the business works and how the world of commerce works. Because, let's face it, whether you are excited by it or not, I think we live in a world that is, hardwired on commerce. And so it's a good idea to understand how commerce works, how business works, what companies do to survive, and how people get paid. And so you can have a good idea about whether that is exciting enough for you to do an MBA or not. So as you go through your school years and even your engineering years, I would keep an eye on spend some time learning the basics of the business. Don't shy away from it. Don't say it's only for the MBAs. Learn some basics of the business. I wish I had done that, but I did it later in life. And if you do that, then you will come to a point where you realize that, okay, you know what, I have some grasp of the fundamentals. I want to develop that expertise and formalize it and provide it greater structure. And I want to become a manager. I want to become a leader. I want to start a company. You will develop these ambitions only if you educate yourself on the basics of how business works. I hope that helps, Rohan.
Yeah. No, that was really insightful. So I have a brother right now who's a chemical engineer, and he's been working for 2 years now, and then he's also been considering doing an MBA soon.
Yeah, no, I think once you work for 1 or 2 years, you do come to this point where you see your brothers probably looking at other people in the company, and uh, generally in a company, like if you're in school and college, your pursuit is you want to be top of the class, you want to have a good time, you want to build your network, you want to do fun things with friends, you want to do great projects, great internships, and in the meanwhile you also want to be top of the class. The goal within the company is not very different, except that there is not a very explicit or frequent grading system. So if you want to grow within the company, there are, broadly speaking, two or three different directions available. If you are somebody that's an expert in finance and accounting, and if this conversation generally is about an engineering journey, but I can talk to other journeys too. Then if you are in finance, then you would want to grow up the finance ladder and become the leader of the finance function in a company. Similarly, if you're in human resources, you want to become the chief human resources officer, and so on for the other functions. Now, what takes somebody to the top is a very interesting question to ask, and that is it's got a very simple answer, and that is your leadership ability. What takes people to the top of the ladder in almost any field? You take politics and life in general. Leadership ability takes people to the top, and it's a big responsibility. It's a highly rewarding experience to be that. But I would say, if one of the things about doing an MBA is that it formalizes even this aspect of it, how to be a leader. Of course, people learn without an MBA as well. But I would say, after if you choose to do engineering or any other, field of education, science, or the arts, and then you decide to work for a couple of years, you're going to confront this question: hey, what does it take for me to win in this company? How do I grow within this company and become the best I can be? And one of the options that you're going to face or be confronted with is, should I do an MBA so that I learn the skills and I can accelerate my journey to the top? And whatever top means in your world, right? The top in your world may be that you want to be the most celebrated software developer in your company. The top in your definition may be that I want to become the CEO of the company. whichever is your option, you're going to confront the question saying, should I do some form of higher degree or specialization in order to accelerate my journey?
Yeah. Um, I know along with MBAs, a lot of people go back for masters, uh,
Yeah,
in like engineering or whatever else they're doing as well to gain a little bit of
that's right,
substance.
Rohan. In fact, it's a good idea in my experience, and a lot of others have told me this too, that you work for a couple of years, because an MBA done without a little bit of a world experience on, how a company works, is going to be very difficult to relate to, because it is not a perfect science. Unlike equations in mechanical engineering or in physics, where you would say, oh, force is equal to mass times acceleration. Oh yeah, good, got it. Unlike that, there are no uh, clear cut equations that make people work together and produce a certain result. Yet there is a science to it. Yet there is a certain structure to it, that there are good ways of doing it and there are inefficient ways of doing it. And it's a science of organizing. You have 100 people in the company. How do you organize them in a way to maximize revenue for the company? And that's a sort of a you could position that as a mathematical question. But the reality is that it's a mix of mathematics and social science, because people have emotions, and you have to mix both in order for this to succeed, which is what makes it a practical science. And that's why I would say somebody is it's worth doing an MBA after a year or two of work.
Yeah. I feel like definitely a lesser extent, but still to an extent. Oh, with engineering, even if you do know all the equations and all of this, you still might not know how to carry out a project or something without that real world experience.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, that's right. I think uh, I would, I think we're going to talk about it a little later, but it's good to be curious. That's the lesson that I learned in my childhood, and I was curious about a lot of things. But I think it's even if from a distance something doesn't feel like it's of interest to you. Let's say, ah, who wants to go see an opera? I'm not interested in operas. Challenge yourself and go and sit in an opera. Maybe that is the turning point that you never foresaw coming. Go to a hospital and see how it is to be in a hospital, to perhaps think of being in the clothes of a doctor, and do I imagine myself doing that? Many people's careers have been defined by these moments where they've been in certain situations and they've suddenly realized this is what I want to be. I didn't do enough of that, to be honest. I think it's a great idea to go forth and boldly explore. We talked about exploring the world of business and learning how business works when you are in school and in college, but you should do that with other fields too, while you're still figuring out what you want to do. Particularly, I think school's a great time to do it. Certainly, earlier done, the better it is. Yeah, but you can continue to be open about these things, because once you do, coming back to the journey, you do a bachelor's and you do an MBA. My career then, in fact, you asked this question and I don't think I answered it, but my career after I did my MBA, I joined a marketing company, Procter and Gamble. And from there, technology, this is again, now we're the 2000s. I'm trying to catch up with all of you and get closer to your generation here. But now, technology was beginning to dominate every single aspect of the business. And so from Procter and Gamble, and selling shampoos, and I was in marketing, shampoos and toothpaste. I pivoted to technology and management consulting, because that's where the excitement was. And I saw that I could make that move because I had an MBA and I had an understanding of the business that was, uh, I could abstract every business, doesn't matter if it was automobiles or consumer goods, it was the management and the business layer that was of greater interest to me. And so I joined Coopers and Lybrand, which became PricewaterhouseCoopers. And my journey continued from that point on in the world of business and technology to this point. And today I work for a 3D AI perception company, which provides visual intelligence of moving objects. So it can decongest traffic flows. It can provide safety in factories, all through perception of visual data coming from sensors. And this is back to sort of the engineering fundamentals, right? But I carry today a business context that is wrapped around all these engineering ideas. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure I answer that question.
Yeah. So, moving on then, can you talk a bit about your other jobs you had?
Yeah. So that's yeah. So after, like I mentioned, after I worked for the automotive company, I did my MBA. I worked for Procter and Gamble. Uh, you know, brands and marketing. Very very good experience. Procter and Gamble. If I hope I'm saying this right, but apologies if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly. But one of the great things about that company was that they once asked the CEO. The CEO once said, "Take everything from me: my factories, my patents, my products, my this and my that, but give me my people. I'll rebuild the company." And so that gave me another insight into what an organization is all about. It's more than just the products. It's more than just the engineering. It's about people. At least I carried that, a long way in my own career. I believe that to be the cornerstone of, you know, a, making a great economy come alive. At the end of the day, is about people working together. So I worked for Procter& Gamble, then I moved on to PricewaterhouseCoopers. Initially, there used to be two companies, Coopers and Lybrand and Pricewaterhouse. So they merged. And then I worked for an Indian outsourcing company, consulting and systems integration company. I was fortunate to have, that was the era in which technology was mainstreaming itself into every single company in the world. And we're now talking about the previous decade that we to this one, 2010s. And so it was a very good time to be in technology. It was a nice time to grow in a company, so I enjoyed all the opportunities for that. And then I worked for ServiceNow. And ServiceNow is is a well-known company. It's a software company that is whose business model is called SaaS, software as a subscription as a service, software as a service. Sorry, it's a subscription business model, and it's one of the leading companies. Once again, if you look at ServiceNow, that company is fundamentals are all based on having great people. And I'm sorry, this just one moment, Ron. There's just some emergency alert on my phone this time. Sorry about that. And now I've worked for this. I mentioned the 3D AI visual intelligence company. It's called CRON AI. I'm just about to join them actually, and so that's been my journey.
Yeah. I just realized it's downpouring and I have my stuff drying outside. Can I come back in 2 minutes?
Yeah, no worries.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm here.
oh, okay, I'm back. I got back from a camping trip yesterday and had all my stuff drying outside, but
Good.
now it's already
Good
in.
thing you brought it back before it got cold, huh? In the evening. Probably not going to get cold now for a while.
Uh, won't get cold. Definitely got wet.
Good. Where do we pick up? Was there just the last question left, I think?
Uh, yeah. So back to what we discussed before the podcast. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and let me frame that question. And when Rohan and I were preparing for this podcast, I suggested to him that one of my biggest learnings, I would like to talk about that. And Rohan said, yeah, it's a good idea. And that learning is that it's going to sound very basic, but I really feel that very strongly. I felt it very strongly in the last few years, is that it's really important to have a dream and a goal. And why I say that is I've heard many inspiring speakers say that, only a small percentage of people in the world have a dream, and even smaller percentage within that, a group of people has a specific goal. And, if you want to succeed, and whatever that success is, as it's defined by you, it's good to have a dream, and it's good to have a specific goal so that you wake up every morning and you know what you're working towards. And I like this like three-part saying that says dream big, execute big, and then you're going to win big. And I look back, and if I were to offer one reflection that can help everybody, it could be that if I were to go back and change anything, it would only be that I wish I had dreamed even bigger than what I dreamt. I'm really happy where I am, but I would have stopped me from dreaming even bigger. If you dreamed about a million, I'm not to mean necessarily in terms of money, but if you dreamed of a million-sized outcome, why not a billion-sized outcome? Why not a trillion-sized outcome? And there are lots of studies that show that the bigger your dream is, the more likely you're to succeed. I mean, isn't that counterintuitive? But it's so beautifully counterintuitive that don't settle for less, dream big. The second is that if you dream big and then you set some goals and you define some priorities for yourself, then you are making choices every day. You'll know when you are contributing to your goals and contributing to your priorities and when you're not. And it's okay to, have fun and do other things, obviously. And that's what life is for. But drifting with a hope that you're going to get somewhere is not a strategy. And at best, it's going to produce mediocre results. When you dream big, there is a certain long-term element that is built into it. When you dream big, when you say I want the outcome in the billions or the trillions, it by definition is a long-term dream. And you set long-term goals, and you also set short-term goals to figure out if you're moving towards it every single day. And so what it creates is that long-term vision and a certain sustaining force. And you may change it. You may realize after a few years that you want to tweak or even completely change your dream and your goal, but that'll happen organically, and it'll be the prime moving force for you to get up every day. And even when you're having fun, you're energizing yourself to go back and achieve these goals. It sounds so simple, but I think so many of us, including parts of my own career and journey, I've realized that, hey, you know what, that I look back and I see that was just a drift. And a drift is very hypnotizing in its own way, because you think by doing something every day you are moving towards somewhere better. You may be, but that's a drifting movement to an incremental better future than a movement that is powered by a dream. So I would say dream big, execute big, and win big. And don't be bold. That's one thing I wanted to share. The second thing is that curiosity is absolute strength. You know, the other day somebody was talking to me about how a certain business works, and you could say, hey, it's just 15 minutes. I can ask a bunch of serious questions about how this business works. Whether is how is oil produced and exchanged between countries, and who makes, why is it motivating for people to do this, who makes what kind of money. And you could say, hey, I'm not interested in it. Neither do you have to be completely ignorant about it, nor do you have to become the world's biggest expert in it. But you could spend 15 minutes today. You could just go to chat gpt, and if you have questions, if you want to be curious, if you have the kernel of curiosity inside of you, the spark of curiosity inside of you, you'll go ask the question and you'll go find the answer. And it may lead you to things that you have never thought of. If you stay curious about people, about businesses, about world situations, new interests will come searching for you, and your next big dream may arise as a result of that. So that's what I would say: dream big, execute big, win big, and always stay curious. Don't ever discount something from a distance, saying, yeah, I'm not going to be interested in that. Spend a few minutes and you might change your mind.
Okay. Um, I think that was a really, really good message to end off the podcast with.
Oh, thank you, Rohan. And I want to also share with you my absolute admiration and appreciation for what you do. I think as a high school student, I'm absolutely inspired by your enterprise and your engagement, and also your clarity of thought and your motivation. I wish you all success, and of course, we're going to keep in touch. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. All the best.